This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? How's your summer going? Rob Barrett's my engineer. It's been hot, very hot here in the Northeast. Maybe it's just hot because you're in the same room with me, Rob. Actually, Rob's behind the glass. That's why you can never hear him. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, and we are back with a full slate of very successful authors, if only because they managed to get their act together and publish what is, in most cases, their very first book. You know, sometimes it's a personal experience. Sometimes it's a gut-wrenching experience. And sometimes it's something about society you feel so strongly needs to be fixed that you're compelled to take the time to put your thoughts together and write it down. Peter Daniels would fit into that category. He is an African-American living in Round Rock, Texas, and a Republican since the Clinton administration. But it wasn't until after the last election that he was finally compelled to write down what he's been thinking for some time, and that is, Democrats have led blacks down the wrong road. The name of his book says it all. Honest Conservatism, Redirecting 50 Years of Black Voting. Peter.
Yes, I worried with it for a while and then came up with that title because the book is intending to convince African Americans to think before they vote. And if they think and do the proper research, they wouldn't vote the way that they have voted in the last 50 years. They've been voting Democrat or liberal or progressive, and I would like for them to either be independent, conservative, or Republican.
Why?
Well, the reason why is that the policies of the Democratic Party haven't worked in 50 years. From the war on poverty to the civil rights legislation, it's been a whirlwind of gimmies and not enough showing the people how to make it on their own creativity, originality, ingenuity. I would like to see the people become a more independent people.
You think African Americans, minorities, are getting too many handouts?
Well, I believe the handouts are being given in a way that it destroys a person's ingenuity. I think that people who are most deserving of the handouts are the ones that should get it. When a man is able to work, he ought to work. When a woman is able to work and is freed up to work by child care being provided, I think she ought to work. And I think too many on the welfare rolls are able to work and they're not, and it's bleeding the country dry.
Okay, so how are Republican policies working more in their favor?
Okay, if you look historically, the Republican Party has been in favor of the initiatives given to make blacks independent. You go back to December 24th, 1868, the Democratic Party created the Ku Klux Klan. If you look at the poll tax, the Constitution literary test that was given to blacks before they could vote, if you take a look at the lynchings, the Jim Crow laws, all of these are policies implemented by the Democrats. Now, today, those policies have taken on a different form. It's economic. And what they tend to do is give me their handouts in replacement. But the Republican Party, as far as I can see, and I've been voting Republican since the Clinton administration, tries to make the playing field level, tries to take away the impediments been set before the Americans by the Democrats, level them or eliminate them to give everybody an equal chance at success. The American dream wants to be realized by everybody, but the current economic system that we have put in by the Democrats needs a dependent class, and the dependent class tend to be black. We are the only race of people that have voted one way, the same way, for 50 years. Nobody else, just us. I wrote the book for two reasons. My father, who was a devoted Democrat until 2 years before his death, and the millions of African Americans who deserted the Democratic Party during President Clinton's administration. Blacks should return to the Republican Party. They should return to the truth, fair play, and return to justice, and to stand for right. The Democrats abandoned this standard bearer for liberty long ago. So in the book, I have given a mixture of history, a mixture of current politics. I delve into the reasons why African Americans have voted that way for 50 years, and it's because of two four-letter words. If I can get them to see how they have been programmed and how they have been brainwashed and how they have been conditioned to vote, and get them to make the change to take a look at critically thinking about what they're about to do, then I think that will make all the difference in the world. It just confounds me.
So you think when people are talking about the voter rolls and Americans having to have IDs in order to vote, you don't...
That's hockey puck.
Okay.
Puck.
All right.
If you can produce an ID to buy liquor, if you can produce an ID to go into nightclubs, then you can produce the ID to vote. Okay. There is nothing wrong with voting with an ID. Everybody should have an ID. And the last election, close to 3 or 4 million people voted without IDs. And this is makes a mockery of the democracy. And the people can find every way to get out of producing an ID for voting, but they get the ID to do everything else.
All right, Peter, you bring up some interesting points. I'll give you that. And by the way, if you're in Round Rock, Texas next month, check out the local library. Peter's going to be doing what he hopes will be the first of many, many book signings. As far as our next author is concerned, not enough has been written about post-World War II Europe or the U.S. constabulary. It's why J. Thomas Callahan, a former cop and court investigator, made it his mission to bring it to life in his book entitled Blitz Police.
Well, the main character, basically, his father's passed away, and he's going through his father's estate and finds his old military stuff that has always been a big secret to him. And while going through that, finds some items that cause him to question his father's integrity. So he decides to dig further and then finds out his father was a lot more than just a quiet engineer that he grew up knowing. His father was a decorated war hero and later was involved in the United States Constabulary and helping to rebuild post-war Europe.
Oh, okay. So his father kept his accomplishments secret.
Basically, it came back from war and did and saw things that you don't talk about in polite society, and so he didn't really discuss his war, what happened during and immediately after the war with his family.
It says in your description of your book that he was confronted with corrupt army officials, black marketers, arms dealers, war criminals.
Yes, the constabulary after World War II was a division-sized military organization put together for the specific purpose of creating a bridge between the regular army and the new civil government, and basically was doing all of the policing and community building, until the governments got up and running. And during all of this, he and his partner stumble upon some black marketing that is involved in smuggling war criminals out of Europe, smuggling arms to communist insurgents during the Greek Civil War, and is basically stealing food and other necessities from the army to sell on the black market.
What made you write about this?
Well, there's several different things. One, there's just not a lot of material out there in the fiction genre about the immediate post-war Europe, and there's almost nothing about the United States Constabulary. And then when I was growing up, my father told me about when he was in the Air Force. One of their mess sergeants was arrested for stealing food from the Air Force and selling it on the civilian market to various restaurants. And once he was arrested, the quality and the quantity of the food that they were given increased dramatically. And then when I was in college, I had a couple of neighbors who were somewhat older than me, 30 or 40 years older than me. They had been young adults right at the end of the war, and they were from Munich, Germany. And they used to, after a few beers or glasses of wine, would loosen up and talk a little bit about what it was like in the immediate post-war period, where there was no food, there was no electricity. You're taking, basically a modern pre-digital society and taking away running water, electricity, public transportation, and just the struggle to survive. So, I thought it would be a very interesting time period to write about.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time period and a difficult one for all those who had to live through it. And, the more we know about it, the better perspective I think we have. Thank you. Alan Coggins did extensive research for his book entitled Escape from Bone Cave, a Civil War Sage. It's about an abused slave brought into a Civil War camp who's befriended by a Union prisoner of war at a place called Big Bone Cave. Alan.
Yeah, it's really not a Civil War book as such, but it takes place against the background of the Civil War in a fictitious prisoner of war camp set outside of a cave and inside of a cave in Middle Tennessee. That cave was mined for potassium nitrate, or saltpeter as it's called, during the Civil War because when the war began, the North cut off any supplies of gunpowder or anything to make gunpowder into the South. Fortunately, there were caves in Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia that could be mined for the saltpeter, and when mixed with charcoal and sulfur, it made gunpowder. So they were able to produce their own gunpowder for the South. Now, this cave was actually mined during the War of 1812 and the Civil War for that product, but it was not done by prisoners of war. I created a prisoner of war camp there just to make it more interesting, and then it's an interplay between three characters: Luke, a Quaker from the North, and a prisoner of war, and George, a slave, and George and Luke are digging in a portion of the cave that has not been dug before, and they accidentally find an escape route, another entrance to the cave nobody knew about. And so they get out and they look around and they think, well, this is all fine, but where are we going to go? We don't know the area. We don't know any people here. We don't have any means to make it to Kentucky to get out of the Confederate area. So they eventually pal up with this local guy who knows all the people around the area and has means to be able to smuggle them up into Kentucky. So this is a trip that they begin to take toward freedom.
Right. I'm curious, in your book description, you talk about scamper monkeys. Is that what these guys are?
These people that dug for the soil, which they were taken out of the cave to process, scampered around all over there, up and down slopes and along the side of passages in the cave, and so they kind of got that name, scamper monkey.
Oh, okay. I mean, it really sounds like you have a grip on the history here.
Did a lot of research. The place is real. The situation of mining is real. All the communities are real. The names were taken from local cemeteries, cemetery stones, although they were changed a little bit so that it wouldn't be. I wouldn't be saying something bad about someone in the past.
Right. Now, this story is pretty involved. They eventually find more gold than they can possibly carry, and they bury it. They take some with them, and they're escaping, and they're trying to get northward. So do you do this? Do you wrap this all up in one book, or can we look forward to a sequel?
I have been asked to consider writing a continuation of the book because it ends in a question
Okay, well, get on that, Alan. Readers are going to want to know, if these guys make it and what they do with all that gold they find. With that, we are going to take a very, very short break. Coming up, talking sex with special needs kids and a story about a necromancer. Don't you go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books, and unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them, and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
Hey, thanks for coming back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Sex and special needs children. How do you have that conversation? Matt Lacoe decided to answer that question with his book entitled You Won Your Race. He wrote it after he and his wife were faced with having to explain the pregnancies of several girls, barely teenagers, in their kids' school. Matt.
I mean, the reality was that I have 3 special needs kids, and their big thing was trying to figure out how I was going to educate them appropriately on sex. The reality being what it is, a lot of peer groups in schools will teach your children if you don't. So I decided that I would generate a book where I could use similar type of issues or nuances to talk about the sex ed without getting into the biological complications of it, but still convey the concept. And that's what this book has done. It is meant for a younger audience or even a special needs audience. And what I wanted to try to do, because a lot of parents have a hard time with that awkward conversation, was find a way to bridge the gap and create books that would allow parents to sit down with their children and open that dialogue, build that trust, and address those issues.
Now, you're raising 3 autistic children.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it difficult to discuss this with them?
No, actually, they were my guinea pigs. I wound up deployed to the Middle East, and I got a phone call at about 2 a.m. from my children, and they asked me basically what sex was and how our baby's made. And I've had a lot of questions come from my children, but I think that one sobered me up about as quick as any alarm I could ever want. Right. And I wound up trying to think of the best way to convey the message, and that's the explanation I gave them. It took, and when they went to school and they started to grow up, and then they did get into the biological aspects of sexual interaction, they were able to transfer that idea directly into the biology without having a misnomer of misinformation.
So what did you tell them without telling them?
Basically, I associated the entire thing to holding a race. If you had to have a race, you need 2 things. One being a track and the other one being cars. And I explained to them that men bring the cars to the table and women bring the track. And when the 2 get together, they're able to have a race. And without it, they can't. And then the winner of that race, after a 9-month party or so, winds up coming into the world.
Okay, and they accepted that.
They did.
It's like a metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. The whole book is a complete metaphor. It's designed for children to explain the idea. But what was more important to me than actually the sale of the book was making it available as a tool. So I wanted it just out there. And if people could open that dialogue, I found raising my children that once you build that rapport with your child, even on topics like sex, they're able to come to you with anything. Right. And you know, because you've built that trust, you've built that foundation, and I think that this book is a good tool to build that and make that a critical step.
Thanks, Matt. Shadow Grave is the name of a book by Stephen Ramsey about a guy who escapes death in an ancient temple at the hands of his master. He's traveling the world looking for the strength he needs to defeat his one-time master. And where do we go from there, Stephen?
Well, basically, it revolves around the life of my main character. And despite his being betrayed by his own master, eventually that leads to him starting to just kind of travel around, Europe, Asia, and all that stuff from his perspective, trying to find more power so that he can better defend himself next time they meet.
Okay, so he escaped certain death in an ancient temple at the hands of his master.
Yes.
All right.
And that's fairly early on. So he has command over The Walking Dead.
Okay. So where did you get this idea?
Like, I've been jotting down the ideas for this since I was in high school. Never got around to, actually doing anything with it because, I was still in school.
Like how many years out?
Oh. We're looking about 8 years right now.
Oh, okay. Well, you're still pretty young.
Yeah, I graduated a while ago.
All right. So if this guy's going to survive, he's got to defeat his former master and then figure out his life.
Basically, yes.
All right, but there's another figure following him.
Oh, yeah. It's basically sense of adventure and trying to figure out your own life along the way. Because the whole time, he's basically, people are being such, trying to kill him and basically just trying to make his life miserable. But he still manages to find friends and, essentially go on an adventure despite all the bad things that are happening to him. Really, that can happen with anybody.
Right. Just living life can be like that.
Yeah, basically. I did end up going to college, but then I ended up discovering I actually had epilepsy in college.
Oh, dear. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, so then that kind of threw things off a little bit.
Okay, so what are you doing now?
Well, I'm currently working at Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, but I haven't worked in a few weeks because of medical stuff.
So you basically, right now, that's what you do?
That's what I do for now. Honestly, I'd like to be an author as a career.
Okay. Are you going to keep writing?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about maybe doing at least a trilogy for this month.
Okay.
I mean, so far I'd say it's been a pretty good experience so far for being my first publisher and whatnot.
Okay. You're just hoping to keep writing at this point.
Oh yeah, it's as good as it's been for this book. Yeah, I could see it doing for a long time.
Okay, well, I hope you do. I wish you many years of writing, Stephen Ramsey.
Thank you.
Finally, B.C. Elaine is a college student publishing his very first book. It's entitled The Dragon's Curse. He writes, "The world ended 3,000 years ago, the surface empty and dead. Mankind only survived by carving new cities in great sinkholes called crads, where one man guards the town against the threats of the world beneath them." Okay, you got me.
Actually, the world above is a dark, empty, dead place. The world beneath is still there. There's still some life down there. There's still, so it's not that everybody is dead. It's that they had to move. And I came up with that idea because I was actually just playing a game one time, and it's one of those world manipulation games where you can change the world around you.
Okay.
And I was playing the game, and I was digging a hole, and I was trying to make it so I'd never have to leave this little place that I could carved out for myself, because I don't want to go out and constantly fight the dangers out there because I'm a boring player. And I just took a step back, and I realized, this would make for an interesting setting. So the story is, there's a man, a guard, he's just doing his job down there in the crads, and he winds up going on this little excursion out into the tunnel. And the tunnels is pretty much the new wilderness, if you will. And as he's going out there with a couple of companions, he finds a ancient tomb. And in this tomb, there's all these motifs and sculptures of dead dragons, skeletons fighting at the behest of a single man. And as they get deeper and deeper and deeper, they come upon this great sarcophagus. And inside, they find someone who calls himself the Dragon Curse. And we come to find out that this was a title given to him by the dragon because of a power he held. And so you have a guy who basically has an army of undead dragons at his beck and call. And the guard, Tarn, the main character, being the kind of guy he is, goes, well, I created a problem, so I guess I have to go fix it. So he begins a quest, just to go out and stop this guy.
Is this the beginning of a trilogy?
It is. Definitely tell by the end of the book.
Yeah, well, I can tell just by talking to you, man. This is going to be deep. It's going to be involved. It's going to be a journey. It's going to be interesting. So now what?
I have a bit of an internet following, those small works on the internet, like I said. And I've been building an audience there. But I'm also doing stuff kind of in real life. One thing I plan to do is I plan next year on taking my book to Dragon Con, which is the big con down here in Georgia.
Yes.
And selling it there.
That's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't write it with Dragon Con in mind, did you?
No, I did not. No.
How fortuitous.
I wrote it because dragons are awesome. Well, dragons.
Yeah, dragons are the best. They're great characters. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So this guy begins his odyssey, and it's 3 books. And are you going to be dressed like a dragon when you go to Dragon Con? Or are you going to...
No, I'll be dressed as myself.
All right. Were you inspired at all by video games or anything like that?
Games were a big thing. Actually, a lot of the meat for the actual story comes from a tabletop game that I never got to put together. I was going to put some my friends through a little adventure, and they just had to cancel it, so I just used a lot of the story ideas I had and tried it again.
Good enough. So build on that internet following, and we'll see you at Dragon Con. Rob, I'll see you next time we put together another edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Yes, I know. It went fast, didn't it? Good things always go fast. What can I tell you? If you are listening right now, thank you. We appreciate it. But you know what? You can also download our shows and listen anytime you want at 710WOR.iHeart.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I hope you're having a great week. We'll be back before you know it.